Meanwhile, it appears some Senate Republicans are still raising concerns about Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence. Gabbard met with lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday, but according to Reuters, sources say at least 8 Republicans are unsure about confirming her to the position. Reuters reports those lawmakers believe Gabbard was unprepared to answer tough questions during her initial round of meetings last week, including her 2017 visit to Syria with then-President Bashar al-Assad. The senators are also reportedly concerned about her lack of intelligence experience. If Gabbard loses the vote of these 8 senators, she'll need support from Democrats. The former Congresswoman met with Democratic Senator John Fetterman yesterday. So, I mean...
So Maura, it's sort of this amorphous kind of moving group of Republicans, which actually makes a lot of sense because if you are if you're focused on intelligence issues your entire adult life, you're not going to turn it over to somebody who says sympathetic things about Russia and Assad. Same thing with if you're interested in America's national defense, probably not Pete Hegseth. I will say, I mean, Gabbard doesn't surprise me. I've always thought that she was like the most at risk of going down in a nomination fight. But I will say I was a little surprised yesterday at how open some very conservative Republicans were on RFK Jr.
No, that's what I'm saying.
We're moving all around. But I think it's very interesting, too, that, like, John Kennedy was that way because we Southerners understand that, like, the vaccine...
It's no joke.
...really helped the truly disadvantaged in the Deep South more than anybody else.
Well, there's a lot going on here. But I think that... First of all, I do think that these senators are trying to flex some power with Donald Trump because they don't want to spend the next 4 years just being a rubber stamp. And I think they're kind of trying to test their limits to see how far they can go without enduring his wrath. RFK is a decent target considering the fact that he was a former Democrat. And so it's much easier for them, I think, to kind of raise some questions about this. But there are some of the conspiracy theories that RFK has trafficked in have real concerns even in red America. For example, the drinking of raw milk. You know, some of the movement within this kind of RFK, conspiratorial, it's like a weird holistic movement. It's like not everything within that is bad. But there are just...
weird thing, though, like you talked about the raw milk and we're talking about vaccines. We conservatives used to make fun of hippies in San Francisco and Marin County going vaccines. No, this was just like a decade ago that we would mock and ridicule sort of these new age left-wingers for all the things that they've strangely become like mainstream for a lot of Trump supporters.
Yeah, the other thing about this is that if you are involved at all in kind of the social media universe of the trad wife movement or of this kind of holistic universe, you're seeing things that some of these Republican senators who are of an older generation may not be seeing. So there may be a disconnect between what they know to be realistic. For example, they're thinking, we support pasteurization. It's not a particularly radical view. But I do think that...
We're doing pasteurization and fluoride in the water.
I mean...
And the polio vaccine. Which I understand there's a quote that was unearthed from RFK Jr. saying more people died of the polio vaccine from polio itself, which would come as a big shock to tens of millions of Americans that somebody actually believes that.
Yeah, it's a clip from a few years ago, but it's resurfaced this week with Kennedy making the rounds on Capitol Hill, suggesting the vaccine was deadlier than the disease itself, which, of course, it could not be less true. And we see Mitch McConnell is a living, breathing example of someone. Polio is in our lifetime. and then eradicated, thankfully, because of this disease. So, Molly, it seems like I was really, like Joe was, struck by Senator Kennedy yesterday, because we've talked for a while about, well, it's not always going to necessarily be the same 4 senators who say no. Yes, Murkowski, Collins, McConnell might be more reliable on most, maybe not all, but you're going to have to fill in the gaps with 1 or 2 somewhere else. Tulsi Gabbard held up, Joni Ernst held up as an example, maybe opposing Pete Hegseth. She still may. I know there's been warmer rhetoric. We should not suddenly suggest that she's a yes vote. But now the senator from Louisiana stands as maybe an unlikely person to oppose Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I think it's important to remember the Senate is not the House, right? They have a longer timetable, and while they're being threatened with primary challenges, it's not necessarily going to be, a lot of these people are not up in 2 years, though, of course, Collins and Tom Tillis are. Yes. But I do think, it's meaningful to think about Murkowski when she said that thing during the interview where she said you can't bully Joni Ernst into doing what you want. That is meaningful, right? She is not doing that because she's doing that because she's saying we are going to, I think anyway, that she's saying she's going to take Article 2, Section 2 seriously. Now, again, if you bet on Republicans being brave, you will lose a lot of money. But it does seem like there's certainly something here.
The thing is, people need to understand what sort of politician talk.
Right.
And so when somebody says, I'm going to allow the process to play out. What that means is they're looking at somebody sitting in the middle of a rotten wooden floor, and they're saying, I'm not going to push them through that floor. I'm going to just sit, and I'm going to watch the process play out. That certainly is happening right now with Pete Hegseth. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nobody's saying, Joni Ernst did not say, she said, I'm going to see this through to the end. Great. And so it's that way with some of these candidates. And we'll see. Maybe Pete Hegseth ends up passing it. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing from Republican senators.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting about RFK?
I have this exactly what he said.
Well, why did you say that?
Okay.
And then I'll go to...
The New York Times review of Mr. Kennedy's public comments over the past several years shows that he's consistently expressed views about the polio vaccine that are at odds with the medical consensus. For example, he has suggested that the vaccine was first introduced, it might have caused a wave of cancers, quote, that killed many, 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 many more people than polio
that sounds like one
ever
of your texts.
did. It does. One of my texts.
Mika will repeat the same one 12 times.
Thank you.
I don't have to do it that many times.
So he says that after the vaccine was first introduced, it might have caused a wave of cancers that killed many, 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 many more people than polio ever did. And he has said that the idea that the vaccine resulted in a drastic decline in polio cases is a mythology that is just not true.
Well, and that's when John Kennedy of Louisiana basically said, you better back off.
Now,
what's so interesting, and I know since you study science and innovators so much, what's so fascinating about how this actually rubs up against what Donald Trump actually knows is one of his great legacies is Operation Warp Speed, which he could not talk about over the last 7 or 8 years because his base did not want him to talk about it. But I suspect that at the end of that career, it's going to be like one of the first rooms in the presidential library because it really was, to do that in 1 year is something that few people expected. So that's why I do think he runs sort of head-to-head with Kennedy on the vaccine issue.
It's absolutely fascinating because, indeed, that Operation Warp Speed, getting a new type of vaccine, was great. He was proud of it, and yet he's now made uncomfortable. You got 2 senators from Louisiana, by the way. You have, Senator Kennedy, you talked about, and I think he's using abortion as a cover, as a way to say, okay, I can vote against Bobby Kennedy, perhaps, because of the abortion issue. But you also have Bill Cassidy, a
Yeah.
medical
A doctor, right.
who, by the way, voted for conviction in the impeachment trial of Donald Trump. Now, he's up for re-election, and he may say, okay, this is the end of my term. But I know that Senator Cassidy, as a doctor, just is appalled by some of this stuff.